A major roundup of drug mafia suspects by the U.S. Attorney's Office. Tonight, more than 24 of the Metro's biggest suppliers are off the streets. First Alert 4's Russell Kinsall is following this story tonight.
Yeah, Corey, according to federal prosecutors, this was a drug distribution and money laundering operation. Now, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office, 34 suspects were indicted by grand juries, more than 24 arrested. In court, prosecutors said those arrested were either members of or connected to an organization called the Black Mafia Family.
He's being accused, and WAC 100 talked about this, of third-party cooperation against a St. Louis kingpin named Cuffy.
Don't use Meech right off the rip. We're just using it as an example for you rat bastards. You know what I mean? What the brother Cuffy is saying is that Meech had a girl that she went out and her job was to set someone up to bring them in, and being that she don't have a case, that they will credit her bringing this big fish in to whoever she want, and she choose Demetrius Flannery.
I've seen a lot of posts about the Big Meech concert getting canceled. What I'm not seeing is anybody blaming Rick Ross for this shit. Nobody is saying, yo, Rick Ross, it's your fault. So I'ma do it. Yo, Rick Ross, this shit is your fault. You the reason why Big Meech is going through this shit out here right now, you heard? Because when we was on the internet talking about the Cuffy case and all that, nobody even really gave it. But now 50 talking about that shit, and everybody listening. Everybody listening, you heard? So, I just want to say, or I want to ask you, did you think that shit was a good idea in hindsight? Do you think it was a good idea to be in the video with me talking about Sexy Red?
Sexy Red.
Yeah, you think that was a good idea? Also, how you let that nigga get the show canceled in Florida, B? That's kind of diabolical, you heard? 50, that's some bullshit. How you let the nigga get the show canceled in Florida? Let's get to that.
According to the rat, the government informant, Tammy Cohen, according to Big Meech, according to Cuffy, and according to the indictment and the case law, he met him in jail. Years later, he called Tammy Cohen on the phone. Called Tammy Cohen, said he was trying to get in touch with Meech. Even if Meech ain't do nothing wrong, and I ain't see nothing in it that said Meech was hot, like Cuffy and them alluded to CS2 was Big Meech. I don't believe that was Big Meech, because Big Meech is identified. Demetrius Flannery, he is identified in the court proceedings. There's no reason to hide CS2 when Demetrius Flannery is already identified.
This video isn't going to be filled with lies, hype, and propaganda that revolve around Meech to paint him out to be a snitch. Instead, this body of work is going to be based off an actual 200+ page transcript rather than the 32-page doc that has been so widely overcovered and spun to fit personal narratives. What makes this video different is that we will point out key factors rather than just reading the doc and giving my own opinion. Like the homie Sticky Situation TV so frequently states, this is one sticky situation. Contrary to popular belief and erroneous statements that have been made on social media, there is no 5K1 pre-sentencing downward departure or Rule 35 that has been recorded and filed on Demetrius Flannery. If that were really the case, Demetrius would have received an extremely smaller sentence than Terry. For those who are saying that Demetrius told on Terry, that shit is straight cap.
That's cap! That's cap! That's cap! That's cap! That's cap! That's cap!
However, the streets have spoken. The verdict is in. To no surprise at all, the general consensus isn't what you think it would be. Demetrius Flannery, the man more commonly known as Big Meech, former boss of the infamous BMF, a massive drug empire that had over a 20-year run before getting popped in 2005, still under heavy public scrutiny after paperwork would leak roughly about a year before his release from prison. With that being said, the verdict on Big Meech and the alleged role that he played in Deon Gatling, aka Cuffy's case, still has two opposing sides. Even after a plethora of videos being uploaded to the internet, some are still supporting Meech, while others are feeding him to the wolves. If you really believe that Cuffy is not a certified street legend and didn't play an integral part of BMF ever existing, you would be sadly mistaken. Dion Lamont Galling, aka Cuffy, pled guilty to conspiracy to distribute and possess with intent to distribute yayo and conspiracy to distribute and possess with intent to distribute heroin, as well as attempt to possess with intent to distribute heroin in violation of 21 U.S.C. 841 A-1 and B-1A. Attempt to possess with intent to distribute yayo in violation of 21 U.S.C. 841 A-1 and B-1A, and discharging a firearm in furtherance of a drug trafficking crime, resulting in death. Each count carried a statutory maximum sentence of life imprisonment, with the term of imprisonment on count 5 to be served consecutively to any other term of imprisonment. The district court imposed the United States Sentencing Guideline range sentence of 324 months of imprisonment, as jointly recommended by the parties. Cuffy would ultimately appeal, arguing that the district court imposed an unreasonable sentence that did not adequately address the factors enumerated in 18 U.S.C. 3553-A. In typical corrupt criminal justice fashion, the appeal was dismissed in accordance with the appeal waiver in the parties' plea agreement, which in turn Cuffy would waive the indictment and plead guilty to counts 1 through 5 of the superseding information pursuant to a plea agreement. If Tammy Cowan's known dirty, underhanded, disgraceful snitch had been charged with lying under oath or perjury, he would have faced felony perjury charges, punishable by up to 5 years in prison and fines. Tammy would also have been guilty of felony obstruction of justice. The Franks hearing centered around whether law enforcement included misleading information in the search warrant affidavit, violating Franks versus Delaware and justifying the suppression of evidence against Cuffy. Cuffy lost the hearing because the court found no material falsehoods or reckless omissions in the affidavit that would have invalidated the search warrant. Despite the controversy around Tammy Cowan's identity being exposed, the judge ruled that there was still sufficient independent evidence, including wiretaps, controlled purchases, and witness testimony, to uphold the warrant and allow the evidence against Cuffy to stand. According to the judiciary, Cuff was set up fair and square within the federal rules. Keyword: set up fair and square. Now, ain't that some shit for them pigs to say? How did we get here, you may ask? Let's find out. For all of you conspiracy theorists spreading false information, you must first remove your tinfoil hats. An 11C1C plea does not require the defendant to testify against anyone, nor does it require the defendant to cooperate against anyone in any shape, form, or fashion. Rule 11C1C allows the defendant and federal government to agree that a specific sentence or sentencing range is the appropriate disposition of the case, or that a particular provision of the sentencing guideline or policy statement or sentencing factor does or does not apply. The real purpose of a plea under Rule 11C1C is to limit the sentencing judge's discretion. However, the sentencing judge has the discretion to accept or deny a Rule 11C1C plea. But once the plea is accepted, the sentencing judge is bound to sentence the defendant pursuant to the parties' agreement, absent favorable changes in sentencing guidelines or to rectify a constitutional violation.
What is an 11C1C plea? An 11C1C plea is the unicorn of pleas in federal court. An 11C1C plea takes the power away from the judge after the judge agrees to accept it to devise the judge's own sentence. An 11C1C locks in the judge into a certain sentence or a certain determination if the court chooses to accept the plea. And if the court accepts the plea, the court does not have the power to do anything but what has been agreed upon. Certain districts federally do not offer 11C1C pleas because the U.S. Attorney's Office wants to have the control with the judge as to what the appropriate sentence is. In other districts, especially if the client's willing to take some jail time or maybe even a high jail number, the U.S. Attorney's Office gives you an 11C1C plea. And this, I think, takes a lot of uncertainty and a lot of anxiety from the client in terms of what will my sentence be? You know exactly what you're getting.
In federal cases, the government pushes the narrative that it is in the defendant's best interest to accept a plea deal. However, sentencing is tricky because the potential sentencing range can be extremely wide. Rule 11C1C pleas help limit that gap, as well as provide the defendant with a much clearer sense of the sentence that he or she can expect. All right, let's break this shit down. What nobody is paying attention to is the fact that the docs clearly read that Tammy went to the defense and told them everything. Hence the reason for the defense being triggered to request a Franks hearing on the behalf of Cuff. These are all facts, not just my opinion. Had Tammy not went to the defense, there would not have been a Franks hearing. In fact, telling ass Tammy was telling on everybody, even the DA. She would even threaten to write a letter to Washington, D.C. Now let me holler at that boy Meech.
Bring that ass here, boy.
This portion of the video is for all of my street niggas and street niggas only. It's a known fact that even when you are in the pen, any nigga with his ear to the street still gonna get the low. When a dude of Terry White's caliber gets popped, you would be hard pressed not to know the details. What I am saying is this: how they got popped, where they got popped, what they got popped with, and who got them popped would not be a mystery to you. With that being said, regardless to Meech being locked up, he definitely knew that Tammy had gotten dude popped. I'm almost willing to say when Meech got the low is when he decided to go with his move on Cuff. To make matters even worse, ask yourself this: why didn't Meech catch any conspiracy charges with the whole Tammy Cuff Suarez shit?
Something is wrong here. Dead giveaway. Dead giveaway.
Charles, thank you very much.
Dead giveaway.
Thank you very much for your time.
Although this specific detail is not in the paperwork, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that shit out. At this point, if you still believe Meech didn't know that this bitch was working, I don't know what to tell you. This pretty much debunks the Meech didn't know she was working shit. If you have been listening to hear and not just listening to respond, you would know that pages 4 and 5 of the docs read that Tammy initially involved Meech with the plan to take down Cuff, but retracted her statements. This fact has already been pointed out and discussed by Eon of the DC Blacks, Dogface, and Sean G. I can 100% guarantee you that telling ass Tammy retracted her statement after Meech telling her that he doesn't want his name in that shit, which were Meech's exact words per the legal documents.
But this allegedly took place in 2013. And also a caveat to that is, I think what I was reading or what I heard was that it was of Meech's request that if he went along with this, his name not be in any documents.
Yes, well, that's another ambiguous statement from the public record. The agent represents that Meech had said, keep my name out of this.
Right, out of that's important. Keep my name out of this.
He wasn't talking about, on the public record, he wasn't talking about cooperation. He's saying if Suarez and Cuffy are doing business together, keep my name out of that. He's already doing a 30-piece.
Right. He don't want any more. So
if Suarez gets knocked off with Cuffy, the fact that Meech hooked these two guys up together puts them in the middle of a conspiracy.
Yes.
And so his statement could easily have been, keep my name out of this because he doesn't want to get charged. Now, according to Cuffy, in the closed testimony in the hearing, she said that she was acting on behalf of Meech, and she was doing it because he didn't want his name to be attached to the cooperation effort. Either scenario is plausible.
Unfortunately, that entire conversation would still, however, make it to Cuff's Frank hearing documents, further confirmation that Meech was in on the play the entire time. Again, we are not here to perpetuate lies, such as Meech has a Rule 35, 5K1, or downward departure. We're strictly pointing out the facts. Although Cuff's interviews on social media do have some inconsistencies, such as who called who first, there's no denying the fact that Meech made the connection between Tammy, Suarez, and Cuff. Without Meech's introduction, Cuff never meets Tammy or Suarez. Now let that shit sink in for a minute. At the end of the day, Demetrius Flannery's biggest mistake was coming home from prison, trying to be Big Meech instead of being Demetrius Flannery.